better than two.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Commissioner Talk. This will actually be episode 4. Today, we're going to cover one meeting, which is always my intention, is to cover one meeting so we can just have them short, bite-size. I expect no more than 30 minutes. I know the last one had 2 meetings in it and the one before too, but I'm all healed. Everything's good to go. We're back up and running. So this meeting is March 17th. And I guess you could say we always have a couple big things, but this one was just one big thing again, and it's on the courtroom where we just made a decision to move forward, and I'll cover that here in a minute. But everything started out, like always, with the meeting. We had a National Library Week, which is April 6th through the 12th. So Chad Young, County Attorney, read basically a statement commemorating upcoming Library Week, and that's how the meeting started. We had a few public appearances. We had some folks, if you go back and watch the meeting or you've watched the meeting, all the public appearances pretty much, with one exception, well, 2 exceptions. We had Joseph Knowles came and talked to us again, about our Constitution and some things that he believes can be done to streamline government. And then we had another gentleman that got up and talked a little bit about that, but more or less he was wanting to talk about the crossing at the railroad tracks off of Ooltewah-Ringgold Road where he lives, and he feels like the county needs to go out there and look. There's some filling in that can be done to make the ride over the tracks a little bit easier. So we took that documentation to follow up with him. And then the additional speakers, we had Judge Hollander, who came and spoke about the courthouse, which we'll address in this meeting, and what he felt their needs were for the courthouse. And then we had another gentleman who's a local attorney that also spoke, and he said he was there to speak on something different, but I don't quite think he ever got to what that other thing was. He spoke just on the courthouse and his opinion as an attorney and what the need was of the courthouse, which both those needs centered on the fact that we need an additional courtroom. So we'll get to that when we get to that part of the meeting, and that was public appearances. Fiscal matters, we jumped right in. So the first topic, everybody knows our courthouse, which has obviously been a topic of the last few meetings, but this was in regards to our windows. So the courthouse, obviously, as old as it is a historic site. And so we've got a need at the courthouse to put some new windows in, and they need to be energy efficient because those windows, when they were made, are anything but energy efficient. And so obviously the folks there, we have heating and cooling issues depending on the time of the year and all that. Well, originally years ago when it was put out for bid, when you have a historical preservation site, you have to follow the guidelines for that historical preservation. So the windows were an enormous amount of money. I think they were ticking up close to $500,000 to replace the windows in the courthouse. And so thankfully, we said, I think there's a better way, and prevailing heads got together and said, hey, we want to go back and present different options to the Historical Preservation Society that we can maybe come up with a more economical option that are still aesthetically given the look of the old window, but to kind of get brought to the new standards. And in this case, it's an aluminum-based window, but it looks like a historical window, and the cost is significantly less. And so that's where we started the meeting under fiscal matters. Travis Hicks with the building department came forward and said, hey, here's what we were able to do. After we came back and we were approved to put out the bid again with the different changes in the guidelines to make it fiscally a little bit better for us as a county, they put it out for bid again. And so when they put it out for bid, bottom line was they came back and here were the options. 3 bids were received. Although after the bid evaluations, the staff recommended Chasler Inc., and which was one of the bids, and they were the low bid on the totem pole to come in. And so their bid was twofold, and every bid gave 2 options, which I found unique. And here's the difference in the options. One was a fixed window, meaning it's a window that you can never lift up or down. It's a fixed window. It goes up. It looks great, but it's fixed. And the second option, of course, was for a single hung window. In other words, just like your window at your house, you can open the window up. Well, listen, I mean, it's a no-brainer when you look at things. You want to have a way to egress in case of a fire or emergency, and a window is one of the best ways. So by no means did anybody thought or thinks that having a fixed window is a great idea. Yeah, you can smash the window out, but who wants to be doing those things? And then, hey, maybe there's a nice summer day where somebody at the courthouse, temperature's just right and they want to hear the birds chirping. Bottom line was the cost, which was crazy. The cost on these bids were only $279,900 for all the windows in the courthouse. For a fixed window was going to only cost $278,000. So basically, there was only $1,000 difference from a fixed window to a single hung window. So it was a no-brainer for us. I mean, if there had been a big spread of money, it might have been a consideration, although for me, it still wouldn't have been. And I'm sure the other commissioners sharing that thought. Safety should always come first. You can't put money over safety. So anyway, bottom line was the high bid was in the $400,000 range. The other bid came in the $300s. And this bid from this company came in at $279,900. And they vetted them out properly. And not only were they low bid, but they feel like, hey, they're a company that's going to do what we need them to do. And all the references and everything checked out. So thankfully now we've approved for the courthouse to finally get new windows, which will considerably lower our heating and cooling costs in the courthouse. So that's a great thing. That's a great building. It's a historical building. It's always going to be there. So as a commissioner, I'm a steward, like the rest of them, over all of our historical sites. And so we made a decision to get these windows done. And it's taken years because of the cost difference and the work that had to be done. So got done. Thank goodness we can move forward. The second thing up was Georgia Emergency Management. Steve Quinn, who runs our emergency management 911, he's our director, came forward, and there is we always like to talk about these things, right? Everybody wants to say grants are a good thing, and some folks say grants are a bad thing because it's just taxpayer dollars, and if we did away with grants, we could pay less in taxes. There's an argument for that, but at the end of the day, grants are what we have, and if we don't apply and try to take advantage of grants, guess what? Somebody else is getting them, and we're not getting our tax dollars back in some way, shape, or form. So Steve Quinn got together, and they've got a grant. And so here's the thing. We've got the ability with this to send an application in to get a backup generator for the administrative building here in Catoosa County. That's our central hub of operations. So if we have another event like we had in 2011, tornado event, or some catastrophic event, we want our central office to still be able to be up and running and have power to continue the work of the county. And so the bid went out, or not the bid, the grant went out, and we're applying for that grant. It's a 75-25 cost share. So what does that mean? What that means, if we apply, get a grant for $100,000, we've got to spend $25,000, they give us $75,000. So we do have to spend a little bit of money, but at the end of the day, we're getting way more in return, and it makes sense for us fiscally. So what does it cost? Well, the cost of the generator and everything at the house there is, forgive me today because my printer jammed, so I'm going to use notes, and I'm using notes here, was $101,547. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, would chip in, this is FEMA money, of $76,000. Local share would be $25,386. So what comes with that? Well, it's that generator for the admin building. Runs off natural gas, because I asked this question, because the bid breaks out like this. The generator is $53,000. The installation is $50,000. And so I'm like, wow, that's a lot to install. But when you look at how it has to be implemented and put in, and the gas lines and all these things that go along and wiring it into the system, it makes sense. After I asked a few questions, it made perfect sense. But also, in addition, we've got 300 weather radios that we're applying for in this FEMA funding as well. And so we'll be able to have an event where we'll program these radios and be able to hand them out, you, the citizens, and you'll have them. We've bought one on our own at Ace Hardware, and we have it in our bedroom. And a couple of weeks ago, when we had bad weather coming through, 2, 3 in the morning, it was waking me up, but I'd rather know about it than have a tornadic event or whatever come through and not know. So those are all great things that Steve Quinn's putting together from FEMA to get us some money, to get pullback and get some dollars into the county, to get some solutions where if we ever have an event, we're up and running and the county government can still operate, because the men and women that work for us in public works and all these other departments, fire and everything, police, they're all going to be out there working. So we've got to have a hub and a way to be able to make the county continuous to go through that event as well. So that was the second item up as well, which brought us to the third item, Transit Trust Fund Amendment. So Jason Warren with our transit. So what is our transit? I mean, basically, our transit buses are the ones that take, and this is something to be proud of if you're a Catoosa County citizen. We're one of the only transit systems in the area that's totally free to its citizens. There's some that charge, say, $4 to the destination, $4 back, and that's still cheaper than a citizen having to get an Uber to go to a doctor's appointment. Or, well, they talked about it, there's a lot of reasons that our citizens use those buses. And a lot of them are medical. And so we don't charge. And so kudos to Catoosa County for taking care of its citizens that need that help. But what this funding does is they had a project at the parking lot for lighting that they had earmarked for $20,000. And they got the lighting installed, and lo and behold, they didn't use all that money. So what they want to do is to come back and reallocate that money for on the inside to, and let me get this to make sure, transit fund to unspent funds for furniture to cover the rest of the cost of the building security cameras. So we've got security cameras there and we don't have enough. So they wanted to say, hey, we've got money left over from the $20,000. We've got like $7,300 left. We need to continue to put the rest of our security system in. That way the building is secure. The buses in the lot are all secure. We've got them lit now. Now we need that security. So they weren't asking for any additional money. They're just saying, hey, we want to reallocate what we've already got. Luckily, we spent less over here, so we want to finish up a project here. So it was cut and dry on that, and we definitely want to support our transit system here in Catoosa County because, like I said, we've got folks that do dialysis, and they have to go numerous times. Most of the time, they go 5 days a week to dialysis treatments, and those buses will take them there, and they don't have to pay. I mean, they're already in a situation that it's hard to ask for help. Maybe they don't have a family member or someone that could take them to these treatments, but they've got a way from Catoosa County that they can get to and from treatments and not have to pay. So here again, hats off to Jason and his team of drivers, because like Jason said, these drivers aren't just drivers taking them to and from. A lot of times that's the only person that some of these folks talk to. So, they take a lot of pride in their job, and thank you to all the transit drivers in Catoosa County. It's not just transportation you provide, but there's a lot of other services that go along with that. And thank you so much from the commission and from me for doing what you do. So if you notice the agenda item, the next item up was a Firehouse Foundation subs grant that Chief Walston was going to come in, but we didn't have all the hard numbers yet from the provider for that piece of equipment. And so he couldn't come present. So we're going to put that off to a different meeting, which brought us into our proposed approval of TCP 3-year agreement and humanity scheduling module. So what does that mean? It's a time clock system for the county. So all of our employees come in and they clock in and out of this system. System keeps all the information in there and it goes to payroll, and that's how we get paid. Sheriff Sisk over at the Sheriff's Department, they didn't have a module that really fit his needs. And so he sat down with this company and said, hey, here's what my needs are for the Sheriff's Department, because my pieces move a lot on the board, right? And I need something that my people can use that fits the way we do business every day. And so they came up with another module that fit his needs at the department as well. So, that module is $9,400 the first year and $6,300 every additional year. But Sheriff Sisk was able to negotiate a 50% discount on that module. So at the end of the day, it's a timekeeping system for all the county employees, period. The first year is $40,000, and then it goes to $37,000 for years 2 and 3. So it's something we have to accurately track and keep all of our time records. It's one of these administrative things that it's just a part of doing business. And so the contract came up, time to renew. Sheriff Sisk put some things together that made sense for his department, and he negotiated those things. And here again, I appreciate Sheriff Sisk for all he does for the county, and thanks for looking out for the budgetary requirements of his department and the taxpayers as well. And then we get to the courthouse. So I don't mean to be rushing through, but I know your time's important, and I just didn't want to belabor some of the topics that were pretty cut and dry. So we came back to the courthouse. So if you watched the last meeting, the quick rundown of that is 911 moved out of the courthouse to the new spot at the College and Career Academy, which vacated the 911 space at the courthouse. And the folks at the courthouse thought that that would best be used for a fifth courtroom. It would be a jury room. We have two now, courtrooms A and B. I talked about that last time. We have 4 courtrooms in total, but only 2 can have jury trials, courtroom A and B. They're both on the second floor. And right now at the courthouse, our elevator's down. We talked about that meetings back too. We've approved it. It's underway. Here again, we're another week or probably a week and a half time. The last commissioner talk came out to this one. We're in the process of getting that fixed. So the folks at the courthouse thought, hey, we can use this space for a fifth courtroom. It's on the first floor. With the elevators down, we've got a way to do that. But the problem is, and like I talked about before, is I pulled information to figure out what's the usage of these courtrooms and are they being used to the capacity that we have the 4 now before we go pay for a fifth. And the best analogy I could give to somebody as a business guy, I'm in construction, so we use what we call skid steers. And those are the machines with the bucket on front. We move dirt around. We do other things with them. But if I had 2 of those and I had operators that use those machines 50% of the time, on a 40-hour work week, I was only using each machine 20 hours with 2 different operators. And I wasn't using them, just say I used them from 8 to noon, but from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, those machines weren't operating. But I had a full load of work for both of those machines. The solution for me wouldn't be to go buy a third machine. The solution for me would be I've got 2 that are sitting idle. I need to find a way to use them from 1 to 5 every day. I need to maximize what I've already paid for before I buy a third piece. And so that's kind of where I was at with the courtroom. And they spoke and said, listen, what you're using to gauge that by, the report from the sheriff's office from when a deputy is sitting in the courtroom, court's in session, doesn't give the total picture. And they came this meeting and they presented in work session, Judge Art did, a calendar that showed all the schedules this month, especially for all the court cases that were scheduled for all the different magistrate court, superior court, all the different kind of courts we have in the courthouse. And the calendar was slap full. And they're like, that's why we have a need for a fifth courtroom. But if you still look at it, the courtrooms court's probably not going every day till 5 o'clock, right? There's still time. And for me, I'll be honest with you, Judge Art said, listen, we had court today. I had people lined up around the whole wall of the courtroom because we were having to select a jury and do all these things. Courtroom, and this is courtroom A, our biggest courtroom. It was full. It was standing room only. And so my thought is if that courtroom, the biggest one, isn't really big enough at times, the courtroom in the 911 space is significantly smaller than that one. That doesn't solve our long-term problem either, in my opinion. We need another courtroom A or larger courtroom, right? And so my thing is this, this isn't dead to me. You'll hear me talk about things about this again, but right now to spend taxpayer money of upwards of, I said, $500,000 for another courtroom in a vacant 911 space, it didn't make sense to me. And I went off all the information I had. So last time, if you remember, we had Commissioner District 2, Chuck Harris, said, I really think it needs to have a courtroom. Chairman Henry said, I just don't believe that's the right time for this, for taxpayer money. It's 500 Band-Aids, referring to $500,000, 500,000 Band-Aids. It doesn't really solve the long-term problem. Last time, Charlie Stevens in District 4 said, I wanted to give them enough time to come and present what they said they have as more evidence. And that evidence they ended up presenting that morning of the commission meeting was the calendar. The calendar is a calendar, and it is something to look at. But to me, it wasn't enough to sway my decision or Commissioner Stevens and Chairman Henry. So the vote went 3, District 4, Charlie, District 3, myself, Chairman Henry, 3 in agreement that we're going to take this space. We're going to move the public defender. We're going to move the coroner, Jimmy Sperling's office, out of Rimco Park, where we're paying rent, and put them in the courthouse where we won't be paying rent. And that's a better use of the space for right now. In business, the way I look at it is this. When I went home after this meeting, I didn't sleep that night because we made a decision and we moved on. But I'm going to say this. In business, if you come to me as an employee and you say, I've got a problem, and here's what I think my solution is, which is what happened in this case. There's a problem. They said they needed another courtroom. There's a solution because we've got a vacant space. And I don't agree with you on that. The answer back to you in business is just not no. And that's the end of the conversation. In business, if we say, I don't agree with you, there's an additional conversation. There's more things that come forward to say, well, let's look at this all the way through and let's get every, fact, figure, opinion that we need. And let's really vet this out to find a long-term solution that works 20 years from now, not just today. And that's kind of where I'm at on this. We've made a decision. We're moving forward, but I don't think we're done with this. We need to plan for the future. A commissioner, I'm not looking at today only. I'm looking at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. That's my job. When I leave the commission, whenever that may be, I want to make sure that my decisions were made looking to the future where people coming in after me aren't having to deal with something I just left in their lap undone. That's not my job. My job is to make hard decisions, but my job is to leave it better than I found it and leave it with future planning in mind. So that's kind of where I'm at on this. The decision's been made. We're going forward, but I think and this is me, and I'm as we speak and as this comes out, these discussions will start happening for planning for the future. Is there a future need there? I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. But we need the right solution that fits 20 years down the road, not just today. Because if we're going to spend your money, my money, taxpayer money, we need to do it right and do it one time and be done. And so that's kind of where I'm at on this. It's kind of like the windows at the beginning of the meeting. We could have just spent $500,000 plus and just put in the historical windows, or we could have said, hey, let's take a step back and let's think about this and let's go back and see if we can amend the qualification requirements to be able to do this more economically. It'll take longer, but it'll be done right and it'll be done economically where we're getting the best bang for the buck. And I think that's the same way here. So that was the last thing in the issue, except, got one last thing, we had a zoning case. And we beat this zoning case up pretty good. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it wasn't just like the previous meetings where we had two zoning cases and they were clear cut, easy to make and go on. And so gentleman's got a piece of property off Carpenter Road. And where's Carpenter Road? Carpenter Road is right off Ooltewah-Ringgold Road. Coming out of Ringgold, it's pretty much the first road you're going to take over the tracks on the left going out toward Hamilton County. He's got a piece of property there and he wanted to zone it to industrial. Now, he owns a piece next to it, industrial. This was like 1.88 acres, and the adjoining piece was an additional 1 point some odd acres that he already owns. And it's the piece he's wanting to rezone has a structure on there currently. And so what does he want to do with it? Well, the reason he's wanting to do that is he wants to be a tire recycling center. So what does that mean? Well, he wants to take tires in and either, some people ground them up. I mean, I've seen them in beds for mulch. There's lots of different uses for old tires, and he wants to be able to recycle them for whatever those uses are, and he wants to open up a business there, essentially. And the planning zoning passed it. They had questions on two things that got brought forward by Jeff Fava. One of them is this going to be loud and noisy, and you're running machines and doing the things like grinding up tires? And he said, absolutely not. He said, is there going to be any kind of something going on with tires where it would, put off an odor, a bad smell? And he said, no, absolutely not either. Well, Charlie Stevens, Commissioner in District 4, had a very good point. He said, listen, people bring these tires to you, however you get them. People can bring them and he'll charge a fee, charge you $4 or $5 a tire, if I'm not mistaken. He said to dispose of your tires. I spoke in the last meeting. We have an amnesty day at Catoosa County where you could do it for free. But that's only twice a year. If you've got a need to get rid of tires before then, he's one of these places you could take them to. But Charlie said, listen, if they get rainwater in the tires, that's a bedding ground for mosquitoes. There's lots of things that come along with that, which is a very good point Charlie made. And he said, listen, the ground and everything gets treated so we don't have these issues, and we're very cognizant of that. So we had an answer for that concern. My concern was, Well, if you start stacking tires up there and it starts to become just a blight, in other words, you just got tires stacked everywhere, it just looks like a used tire junkyard. Nobody wants to see that. Now, there's no houses. It does abut to residential properties, but what it is, they're off Carpenter Road, and back there where he's at, it's all wooded where their property is. Their house is up on Carpenter. They've got some clear, and then it's all wooded back to the back part of their property. So he doesn't have anybody that can look out their back window and see it. There's a tree line that goes out from his property. Then you have the railroad tracks, and then you have Ottawa-Ringgold Road. And so one of the things I put in there is I said, listen, I want to make sure you're not able to go and clear those trees. And now the sight line is, because you want more space, as people coming down Ottawa-Ringgold Road can see your business. We have a natural barrier there now, and I want that to stay there because that's, to me, just the right thing for everybody and the citizens involved. So I put that stipulation in there. But one of the things we told them at the end of the day, when we kept going back and forth and asking questions, is in business and like anything, I always say trust but verify. I trust you're going to run a good business. I trust you're going to do the things you tell me, but I need a way to verify. So what we told him is listen, periodically we're going to come by and we're going to observe. And if you start to stack up too many tires, if you're not keeping a very clean looking operation, we're going to put things in place from the zoning side, from code enforcement side, to hold you accountable, because that's our job. We want new business in Catoosa County. We want the right kind of businesses in Catoosa County. We want you. And Charlie asked him, do you live here in Catoosa? And he said, yes, sir. I'm a citizen as well. We want to make sure you stay a good citizen on the business side. So, it's in District 3, so you have my word. I will monitor it closely as well. I want this gentleman to succeed. I think it's great. I think it's a way, an opportunity for citizens to take tires and dispose of them that they wouldn't have had before. But I also want to make sure that we keep our county beautiful and we don't have him going into business create additional problems for the county. So that's kind of what we approved it. 4-0. Commissioner Long was still not here. He'll be back next meeting. So it was 4-0. We approved it, but we all had a lot of questions and we kind of went back and forth. But at the end of the day, it's a trust but verify. We don't ever want to be an obstacle for business. That's not the government's job. And I say that when I ran, right? Government's not to interfere in our lives. Government should be to accentuate the things that we need. It should never overstep, overregulate, or overtax. And so I didn't want to overregulate the gentleman, but I want to make sure we're protected. And that was the end of the meeting. So as promised, wasn't a real long commissioner talk this time. I like these where we could do them in bite-sized pieces. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you again for allowing me to serve. Thank you for the folks that attend meetings, watch online, and watch these videos. And my saying, and you'll hear me say it numerous times, is be curious. I think it's great to be curious and know what your government's doing. The quote that everybody loves to attribute to Walt Whitman is be curious, not judgmental, although it's been vetted that he actually never has written that anywhere. But at the end of the day, it's attributed to him, and that's not a bad thing. The judgmental part is just get all the information before you make snap judgments and things of that nature. And that's the be curious part. So be curious. That's the way I try to run my county government job. I try to ask questions and be curious to make the best possible decisions. You're being curious by watching this, so thank you for that. And until next time, have a great week, Catoosa.
Be better than